After 7 years of animosity and high tensions between Iran and Saudi Arabia, they have come to a deal to re-establish relations. The conflict between the two countries is as ancient as Islam. It goes back to the Sunni and Shiite differences in Islam. However, the recent tensions between the two countries relate to the Yemen civil war. The war in Yemen started in 2014 when the Sunni government of Yemen was overthrown by the Houthi movement of the Shiite sector linked to Iran. The conflict developed into a proxy war where Saudi Arabia has been supporting the ousted Sunni government, while Iran, on the other hand, has been backing the Houthi Shiite government. The tensions between the two countries intensified and cut diplomatic ties after a Shiite clerk was put to death by Saudi Arabia. Consequently, Iranian protesters attacked the Saudi embassy. The peace deal itself is not something new because Saudi Arabia and Iran had diplomatic relations before. The peace deal is great for the Middle East because it will bring stability to the region, and let us not forget the two countries are significant powerhouses among the largest oil producers in the world. Therefore, you may be wondering what is interesting about the deal. A significant part of the Saudi Arabia-Iran deal is that China brokered it. Because this is the first time China has been a mediator between two countries in the Middle East, invariably the two countries that play a massive role as mediators in the Middle East have been the United States and Russia. Therefore, in this video, I will explore why China is taking the mediator role in the Middle East. What does it mean for China? How will this affect the U.S. influence in the Middle East region? And why did Saudi Arabia and Iran choose China as a mediator, given that the Saudis have had a very close relationship with the U.S.? All those questions and others will be discussed in this video. Hello, my name is Yonas Temnewa. Welcome. Please subscribe to my channel, like and share this video. Let us get started. To understand why Saudi Arabia allowed China to become a mediator in the peace deal with Iran, we first need to go back to history to examine the U.S.-Saudi Arabia alliance. The relationship between Saudi Arabia and the United States goes back to the founding of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in 1932. Despite a noticeable clash in values, the United States has formed strong relations with Saudi Arabia's founder, the King Abdulaziz ibn Saud, and his successors. The connection was created through its oil sector and government contracts. The United States' priority has been to provide military protection to Saudi Arabia. In exchange, the Saudis supply reliable oil to the United States and sell oil in US dollars to the rest of the world. The top three oil producers in the world are the US, Saudi Arabia, and Russia. Given the long historic alliance between the two countries, one may wonder why Saudi Arabia reached an agreement with Iran brokered by China without consulting Washington. The answer relies on two main factors. The first one is that it goes back to the 2020 presidential election in the US, when candidate Biden at the time called Saudi Arabia a pariah state. Moreover, the Biden administration released a CIA report accusing Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman of the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. To add salt to the injury, during the early time of his presidency, Biden mentioned that he would not talk directly to Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Instead, he said he would speak with King Salman. Those words insulted Prince Mohammed bin Salman because other leaders met with him, and he is well known worldwide as the leader of Saudi Arabia. So, his authority has been undermined when the US president says he would not meet with him. 2 years later, in July of 2022, President Biden visited Saudi Arabia and stepped back from his campaign promise to hold Saudi Arabia accountable for its actions on human rights issues by meeting with the de facto ruler Mohammed bin Salman. President Biden's one of the main goals from the visit was to ask the Saudis to increase oil production to deny Russia of oil revenue. In other words, the US wants the OPEC Plus de facto leader, Saudi Arabia, to increase oil production so that the G7 sanctions imposed on Russian oil to work. Keep in mind that Russia is part of the OPEC Plus group. The surprising decision of Saudi Arabia was to cut oil production by 2 million barrels per day, which equal 2% of the global supply. The decision was a big blow to the Biden administration because they could not make Saudi Arabia agree to increase oil production. This was the first reason why Saudi Arabia decided for China to become a mediator to re-establish relationships with Iran. The second factor is related to the Saudi Arabia war in Yemen. Keep in mind that the primary relationship of the US with Saudi Arabia is that they will provide military support to Saudi Arabia. In return, the Saudis will supply the US with oil and sell it in the US dollars. Since the Biden administration took office, the US has stopped its position in helping Saudi Arabia in its war in Yemen. So, Saudi Arabia felt it was left alone without US assistance. Therefore, the Saudis are looking for other allies to provide security. China found an opportunity to increase its influence in the Middle East and provide regional security. So, Saudi Arabia is furthering itself from the US because it does not see the US as a reliable partner that will continue to provide security as it used before. Again, remember that the US stopped helping Saudi Arabia in its war in Yemen. So, Saudi Arabia wants to rely on something other than the US for its security and investments. Also, it wants to diversify its economy. Therefore, Saudi Arabia sees China as another option that could replace the US influence in the Middle East region. On the other hand, the relationship between the US and Iran has been sour ever since the Iranian Revolution of 1979. The US imposed economic sanctions on Iran and an oil embargo. Over the years, given Iran's financial struggle, it will benefit much more from the deal that China brokered. First, the war in Yemen could end after 7 years of destruction, saving both countries from spending money on the war. Second, it will get Saudi Arabia to trade with Iran and invest in Iran. Third, Iran gets to anger the US by allowing China to play the role of mediator. Now that we have explained the interests of Saudi Arabia and Iran in the deal, let us look at China's interest in playing the mediator role in the Iran-Saudi Arabia deal. China imports most of its crude oil from Saudi Arabia. It is reported that in 2022, China imported 87.49 million tons of crude oil from Saudi Arabia. That is more than 25% of China's total crude oil imports. Moreover, in 2022, China imported 6% of its crude oil from Iran. So, it is clear that China imports much of its crude oil from those two countries. Therefore, having a close relationship with Saudi Arabia and Iran gives China a reliable oil supply. The most significant interest China has been trying to achieve for a couple of years is, given its position as one of the largest crude oil importer from Saudi Arabia, it wants to purchase natural oil from Saudi Arabia with Chinese currency, the yen. And according to the Wall Street Journal, reported that Saudi Arabia is considering selling its oil to China in yuan instead of the US dollar. If this happens, the dollar will lose its global influence and the Chinese yuan will become the new international trade currency. Additionally, China will be the new global leader in the Middle East and even on the world stage. Therefore, the Iran-Saudi Arabia deal will significantly impact the international order if the U.S. continues to distort itself from Saudi Arabia and the Middle East. It will allow China to continue playing huge roles like mediating in the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. The US will lose its hegemony in the world. That is why the US needs to improve its relationship in the Middle East and specifically with Saudi Arabia. Thank you so much guys for watching this video. Please don't forget to subscribe if you already haven't and comment down below, like and share the video. Thank you again.